Love to shift gears. This is a really natural shift to Palantir as one of the biggest AI application layer firms out there. So the reason why this is topical is that Palantir has its stock price has increased about 65% in the last month. So it's gone from $70 stock to $115 stock. So it's interesting in several fronts. As a pure financial bet, uh, it's got a PE ratio, a price to earnings ratio of 613, super high. Right, you can get Google at like 25 PE right now. So a 600 times earnings, meaning if you take their current year earnings and hold it, you get fully paid in 615 years. so Palantir is on the prima facie like a pretty expensive stock right now. Just a bit of detail. So founded in 2003. Its name is it's from the Lord of the Rings. It's from where the Seeing Stones provide vision. It's got three primary products. It's got a product that's for government called Gotham. It's for the defense sector to utilize technology, AI, to accomplish government aims, including military aims. It's got a product called Foundry, which is their commercial-facing platform, and it's got a product called Apollo, which is a continuous delivery deployment infrastructure product. Okay, so this is application layer. This lives above the foundation model, but they do, I believe they do produce their own models as well. Why is the stock popping? The stock is popping because there's presumption that one, DeepSeek and other large language model releases are going to drive down the cost of models. So if models are super cheap, where does the value go? The value goes into the application layer. Palantir has a really great position at the application layer for Fortune 500 companies and for governments. They recently met with Saudi Arabia, for example, for the possibility of a big contract. So it's a really interesting company at a really interesting place in terms of their stock price. Would love to hear your reaction to either the value of the company's stock or the bet generally on kind of the layer above the foundation model.
Demi, you go
Yeah,
first.
yeah, happy to start. Again, I feel compelled to interject here that this is not financial advice in any way, and make sure to make that very clear. But
Smooth, smooth.
Palantir, candidly, has been a stock that I've been watching for some time, and for me, the thing that gives me pause has nothing to do with the business itself. It's more so that I can't understand, because of the nature of some of the contracts they have with the government, what exactly they're selling, what exactly their unique value proposition is to some other incumbents. The bull case for Palantir, as I see it, is that they have incredibly sticky customers. Now, not to dive too far into the political regime for the sake of this conversation, but given the increased effort in making government more efficient in the United States, that potentially puts firms like Palantir, who sell directly to the government, in a bit of a conundrum. Are they going to have some of their contracts canceled? Are they going to have contracts renewed? That kind of thing. I think, to me, there's still some wide unknowns. There feels to me like, compared to other firms that might be supplying government contracts, Palantir is largely safe and therefore could be a good bet. Shashi, you did a great job of outlining the business fundamentals. I think purely just stacking it up against something like Google or otherwise, it makes it challenging, I think, to invest at the current state. All that said, it feels like this company is in no obvious decline as far as acceleration, and that their market dominance, if you want to call it that, with specificity in the app layer and serving governments, it feels like that's going to put them in a very strong pole position going forward. So I continue to watch this company. I think I'm of equal minds to purchase it and to not purchase it. And so far, I have not ended up kind of owning any shares of Palantir, but it's continued to be one that I watch very closely because it continues to do well. And Moshe, I'll kick it to you for just kind of overall thoughts on AI in the app layer and kind of where the value might be accrued.
For the record, I'm like generally pretty unaware of this subject. I'm reading articles live right now, just trying to understand. Um, I guess like the thing I'm trying to interpret for myself, just sitting here, and this is an open question for either of you to answer. why is a bet on Palantir not just a general bet on cloud? Like why is it different from a bet on Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, that sort of thing?
Speaking
They've
for
got a deeply
me,
ingrained position with their customers. So basically, their customers are going to them to help them solve these problems. They've
Okay,
got relationships at Fortune 500, and they've got great relationships with government agencies. So they're embedded. They're a preferred provider, and they have kind of the technology edge as a company.
I,
interesting. Yeah,
I would
go
agree
ahead,
with
go
all
ahead.
that except for maybe the last point. I think what my comment was earlier is that it's unclear to me whether they have a technology edge or not. And Lakshay, your question kind of tees up the unknown for me that I probably poorly articulated in my dialogue. Is that I can't understand exactly what Palantir is offering the government that is unique and therefore valuable compared to what its would be competitors would be if that is AWS or not. And so like I think it in some ways a bet because of the general, kind of necessary secrecy that surrounds government contracts is that Palantir has a technological edge. And again, I'm of neither
Yeah.
mind of whether they
So
do
let
or
me let
don't,
me
but it
detail
feels
this just
unknown.
a slight bit
Yeah.
more. So early in my career, I worked on um, a shared project with Palantir, and in the defense space. Palantir, since their early days, has developed an ontology, a proprietary ontology for organizing lots of data. They've spent a lot of time and capital doing that. Early on, this helped them with things like visualization of data, and with unstructured data, this can be really helpful. So they do have some proprietary technology. We can debate whether you could infer an ontology now, or how easily that is to replicate. Perhaps it's easier to replicate than ever before with something like a deep research tool. But for at least the time being, having an ontology that they've devoted a whole lot of time to is at least a layer of information that's non-public.
Do you think, given that, it sounds kind of like you're an overall bull on it? Again, I kind of said I'm kind of of equal minds. Do you feel like you have
Yeah.
a particular lean one way or the
Yeah.
other?
So for transparency purposes, I'm an investor in Palantir. I own a significant piece, and I'm thrilled that it's going up. I'm also a little worried that it's getting into kind of meme stock territory. A 600x PE multiple is pretty crazy, and so I'm a little worried that it's kind of in this boomer bust zone. I hope its ideas and initiatives come true. You've probably seen Alex Karp, the CEO. Um, he's witty. He's energetic. He's got a lot of things to say. He was on an interview and believed to be kind of popping us in while he was kind of on a bullish heater. So there's a lot of enthusiasm that seems to be coming out of the leadership at Palantir. And I wouldn't doubt that they're going to crush it in terms of government. I feel like that's just yes. So to answer your question, yes, I'm a bull. The government space, I think they're going to crush it. The Fortune 500 space will completely come down to how much pressure those companies feel to adopt AI to stay ahead of competition. And that competition is not going to come from people in the Fortune 500. It's going to come from insurgents, startups, mid-sized companies that are very aggressively trying to grow. That's the real competition. So that's the part that I don't know.
The thing that has been weird to me just in going to OpenAI Dev Day and just like watching these companies generally is in a typical sense, like one of these companies would hold one part of the layer, right? And if you asked 2 years ago, like ChatGPT was a provider company. They were an API that was research backed, but you could query them and build applications off of them. And once ChatGPT took off, they became an app company. Once businesses started wanting to use ChatGPT, they suddenly became like a consultancy to some extent, where OpenAI, most of their money that's very, very revenue generating comes from enterprise contracts with Pfizer, with governments, that sort of stuff. Um, and so I guess in just like analyzing the layers of things, I look at this news and my gut immediately reacts with like, isn't this also competing with OpenAI? Isn't this also competing with Anthropic? Isn't this also competing with Google? And then follow up question like, what aren't those three trying to compete with? Unless you just assume purely verticalized solutions.
My underlying belief. So I'll give the bull case. My underlying belief is that companies like Google and OpenAI will and DeepSeek will continue to produce models that are more and more intelligent, have longer context windows, allow more chain of thought, more cycles to run when needed, when helpful, and will add tools. But I think where the line ends up forming is in the information that's personalized to each customer. And that's where a layer like Palantir, who deeply knows their customer, in this case has a customized ontology for each customer and understands the data structure, how it works together, and what the customer's end goals are. That layer, I think, will be distinct from OpenAI and Google and DeepSeek because there's just not enough bandwidth for someone at OpenAI to embed themselves deeply at each of these customers to truly solve the problem at that layer. So I believe that will be the case, but I think there will be many other companies too that have customer specific data and advantage that will be able to build on top of these models. And they're going to compete with each other. And then there are going to be small service providers that will also be competing.
Generally agree with everything. They're volleying a question to you in response to that. There seems to be this emergence of building for yourself, right? Like your kind of AI app layer for your internal use case, for your company, that kind of thing. Do you think that kind of simultaneously eats away at the app layer, kind of the value that would be regularly accruing to what would traditionally be the SaaS businesses as well? Because again, I think that, Palantir may be in a class of its own, but as you start to think about other AI companies, if you were going to take a bet on an AI app, understanding that customer, logically no one's going to be able to understand the customer as well as the customer might, right? So even if it's true that the app and the model layer separate, do you see a massive opportunity for providers to overcome that build versus buy dilemma when it does seem like momentum is
Mm-hmm.
building on the build side? Not to be redundant with the
Yeah,
choice of
it's a
words
really
there.
good
Yeah.
question, Damon. I'll go back to my early days in software engineering. I had several jobs where I worked for organizations that were building homegrown CRM and ERP tools. And at the time, those weren't even really acronyms that people thought of. That people just built tools in house for their needs. And then over time, when you could start to buy a really good general purpose ERP or a general purpose CRM, you wouldn't have to home grow your own. You could kind of tweak it on the margins. And so I think it's really healthy that that companies are investing in their own in-house tools. I think the natural trajectory of that will be that there will be really good off-the-shelf tools that will do 90% of it, and your in-house team will be implementing and then customizing. It's a lot like software engineering. When I came out of school, excuse me, when I came out of school, software engineering was sitting at the keyboard typing out all of your code. Now the art of software engineering is much more integrating components and making those components work well together rather than kind of from scratch building each piece of it. So I see a natural trajectory from in-house build toward off-the-shelf buy, and it's going to happen as the tools get better underneath.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Um, yeah, I think on the one hand, it'll be interesting to see if that lived experience is repeated. Meaning, like you get these kind of superficial, highly generic app layers, app AI layers that are coming up. People begin to build bespoke solutions as the AI service providers are able to understand more and more of those particular nuances. Those tools will get better and better, and things like, you might see a new rendition of Agent Force, kind of the AI evolution of Salesforce versus kind of these mini one-offs at each one of these things. Um, so
Sorry, Agent Force makes me laugh. I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm not necessarily overall bullish on Salesforce as a general kind of consensus, but it is, I think, interesting to see these places, the service providers like Salesforce that have very high margin businesses, extreme stickiness, kind of react to this shifting landscape. I think the jury's still out to see whether or not they'll be successful in doing so or what. But